It was the beginning of a new academic year, and Queen's College buzzed with excitement. Girls in neatly pressed uniforms hurried across the school compound, greeting friends and exchanging stories of their holiday adventures. The jacaranda trees lining the pathways were in full bloom, their purple flowers adding a touch of vibrancy to the school's architecture. In a flurry of activity, a sleek black car pulled up to the administrative block. From it emerged a very beautiful woman dressed in a crisp white blouse and a tailored navy skirt. Her ebony skin glowed under the morning sun, and her poised demeanor commanded attention. She was Miss Linda Okafor, the school's newly appointed fine arts teacher. Miss Linda had studied abroad, earning accolades for her artistic talents and innovative teaching methods. Her reputation preceded her, and the school's principal, Mrs. Adeola, believed that Miss Linda would bring a fresh perspective to Queen's College. As Miss Linda walked through the corridors, the sound of her red heels echoed against the marble floors. Students and teachers alike turned to admire her elegance and confidence. Some smiled warmly, while others whispered behind her back, their eyes gleaming with envy. Unknown to Miss Linda, her arrival would set off a chain of events that would forever alter the fabric of Queen's College. Miss Linda's classes quickly became the highlight of the students' schedules. She transformed the dusty old art room into a haven of creativity, encouraging her students to express themselves freely. Paintings, sculptures, and colorful murals began to adorn the once bleak walls of the school, bringing life and joy to the environment. Students who had never held a paintbrush before found themselves lost in the world of colors and textures. Miss Linda's passion was infectious, and her genuine care for her students endeared her to many. She often stayed after school hours to help with projects, her laughter ringing through the corridors as she shared stories and jokes. However, not everyone was pleased with Miss Linda's growing popularity. A group of senior teachers, led by the stern and traditional Mrs. Agnes, viewed her with suspicion and disdain. Mrs. Agnes had been the head of the arts department for over 2 decades, and Miss Linda's modern approaches threatened her established authority. "She's turning the school into a circus," Mrs. Agnes coughed during a staff meeting. "All these colors and drawings everywhere is distracting and inappropriate." Mrs. Esther, the mathematics teacher, chimed in, her lips pursed in disapproval. "And have you seen how the girls flock around her? It's as if she's their friend and not their teacher. No respect for boundaries." The other teachers nodded in agreement, their faces etched with jealousy and contempt. They felt overshadowed by Miss Linda's brilliance and feared losing their influence over the students. Determined to put Miss Linda in her place, the group began to plot subtle ways to undermine her authority and tarnish her reputation. The sabotage started slowly. Mrs. Agnes began assigning Miss Linda extra administrative duties, burying her in paperwork and mundane tasks that kept her away from her beloved art classes. Important memos and meeting notices conveniently forgot to reach her desk, causing her to miss crucial staff discussions. In class, supplies would mysteriously go missing, and completed student projects were found vandalized or destroyed. When Miss Linda reported this incident, her concerns were dismissed as carelessness on her part. "Perhaps you should be more organized, Miss Okafor," Mrs. Agnes suggested with a sly smile. "Maybe then things wouldn't go missing under your watch." The students noticed the undue stress their favorite teacher was under and tried to offer support. But Miss Linda always reassured them with a smile. "Don't worry, my lovelies. Challenges make us stronger. Let's focus on creating more beautiful art." The bullying escalated. Rumors began to circulate among the staff and students, questioning Miss Linda's professionalism and morality. Anonymous letters accusing her of inappropriate behavior with male staffs were sent to the principal. Although baseless, the allegations cast a shadow over her impeccable record. One evening, After staying late to prepare for an upcoming art exhibition, Miss Linda walked out to the parking lot to find her car tires slashed. Tears welled up in her eyes as she looked around the empty lot, the darkness pressing in around her. The next day, she confronted Mrs. Agnes, suspecting her involvement. "Why are you doing this? What have I done to deserve such hatred?" Mrs. Agnes feigned innocence, her eyes cold and unyielding. "I have no idea what you are talking about, Mrs. Okafor. Perhaps you are just not cut out for this environment." Feeling isolated and defeated, Miss Linda considered resigning, but the thought of leaving her students and abandoning her passion kept her holding on, hoping that things would eventually get better. The annual Queen's College Cultural Night was approaching, a grand event showcasing the diverse talents and cultures of the students. Miss Linda had been tasked with coordinating the event, and despite the obstacles, she poured her heart into making it unforgettable. The school auditorium was transformed into a kaleidoscope of colors, with intricate decorations and artwork adorning every corner. The students were excited, rehearsing their performances and preparing traditional attire from various Nigerian cultures. On the evening of the event, the auditorium was packed with students, parents, and esteemed guests. The atmosphere was electric, filled with anticipation and pride. The performances went flawlessly, each act earning thunderous applause. Backstage, Miss Linda rushed around, ensuring everything ran smoothly. Dressed elegantly in a flowing Ankara gown, she radiated joy and fulfillment. As the event drew to a close, Miss Linda was called on stage to receive recognition for her hard work. The audience rose to their feet, giving her a standing ovation. Tears glistened in her eyes as she accepted the bouquet of flowers and expressed her gratitude. But behind the curtains, Mrs. Agnes tittered with rage. Her plan to overshadow Miss Linda had failed spectacularly, and the praise Miss Linda received only fueled her hatred. As the celebrations continued, Miss Agnes saw an opportunity for revenge. Noticing that one of the stage lights was loose above the platform, she devised a sinister plan. Quietly, she made her way backstage and tampered with the pulley system holding the light fixture. Moments later, as Miss Linda was addressing the crowd one last time, a loud creaking sound echoed through the auditorium. Before anyone could react, the heavy light fixture came crashing down the stage. Miss Linda tried to move away, but her heel caught on a loose cable, causing her to stumble. The fixture struck her on the shoulder, knocking her off balance. She fell off the stage, landing hard on the marble floor below. Gasps and screams filled the auditorium as people rushed to her aid. Blood pooled around her head and her eyes fluttered weakly. Among the chaos, Mrs. Agnes slipped away, her face pale and hands trembling. An ambulance was called and Miss Linda was rushed to the hospital. The entire school held its breath, praying for her recovery. Despite the doctor's best efforts, Miss Linda succumbed to her injuries later that night. The news of her death sent shockwaves through Queen's College and the surrounding community. Grief hung heavy in the air, and school went into mourning. Students wept openly, leaving flowers and candles outside the art room, which now seemed dull and lifeless without Miss Linda's presence. Murals and paintings she had helped create became silent tributes to her legacy. Rumors swirled around the cause of the accident. Some believed it was a tragic mishap, while others suspected foul play. The administration conducted an investigation but found no concrete evidence pointing to sabotage. A month after Miss Linda's passing, life at Queen's College attempted to return to normal. A new art teacher was hired, but no one could fill the void Miss Linda left behind. Then, strange things began to happen. It all started one quiet night in the junior girls' hostel. The students had settled into their bunks, whispering and giggling as they recounted the day's events. The matron had done her rounds, ensuring lights were out and all was in order. As midnight approached, a distant sound echoed through the hallway. It was the unmistakable sound of high-heeled shoes striking the tiled floor, slow and deliberate. The girls froze, their chatter silenced by the eerie noise. "Who is walking around at this hour?" one girl whispered, her eyes wide with fear. Another girl, Ada, sat up in her bunk, her heart pounding. "Maybe it's the matron," she suggested, though doubt tinged her voice. The footsteps grew louder, seeming to approach the dormitory door. The sound was oddly familiar, reminiscent of someone they all knew, but couldn't quite place. Suddenly, the door creaked open slightly, and a cold breeze swept through the room. The girls huddled together, terrified whispers filling the darkness. After a few tense moments, the door slowly closed, and the footsteps continued down the hallway before fading into silence. The next morning, the girls recounted their experience to the matron, who dismissed it as overactive imagination and perhaps a lingering dream. But the following night, the footsteps returned, this time echoing through multiple corridors and even the empty classrooms. Word spread quickly among the students about the mysterious nightly visitor. They began to refer to the entity as Madame Koi Koi, named after the Koi Koi sound of the hills. The older students shared hush stories, claiming to have seen a shadowy female figure gliding through the walls, her red heels gleaming in the darkness. Some girls claimed that Madame Koi Koi would appear beside their bed, staring down with sorrowful eyes before disappearing into thin air. Others reported hearing soft melancholic humming, accompanied by the rhythmic Koi Koi footsteps. Panic and fear gripped Queen's College. Students refused to walk alone at night, and many suffered from sleeplessness, dreading the return of the haunting sound. The school administration tried to quell the growing chaos, attributing the incidents to adolescent imagination. Security was increased and curfews were strictly enforced, but the sightings and sounds persisted. A group of brave senior students decided to investigate the phenomenon themselves. Led by Nkechi, the head girl, they planned a vigil to confront Madame Koi Koi and uncover the truth. One moonlit night, Nkechi and three of her friends stayed awake, positioning themselves strategically around the main corridor, where the footsteps were most frequently heard. Armed with flashlights and their faith, they waited patiently as the school sank into silence. At exactly midnight, the familiar Koi Koi sound echoed through the corridor. The girls exchanged nervous glances but stood their ground. As the sound grew closer, a translucent figure materialized at the end of the hallway. It was a woman, elegantly dressed in a white blouse and navy skirt, her feet adorned with striking red heels. Her face was beautiful yet sorrowful, and her eyes seemed to hold the weight of untold pain. Nkechi's breath caught in her throat as recognition dawned on her. "Miss Linda," she whispered, her voice trembling. The ghostly figure turned towards them, her eyes locking with Nkechi's eyes. In a voice that sounded like a distant echo, she spoke. "They took everything from me, my passion, my life. I only wanted to teach, to inspire." Tears welled up in the girls' eyes as they felt the depth of Miss Linda's anguish. Summoning her courage, Nkechi stepped forward. "We missed you, Miss Linda. The school hasn't been the same without you." The ghost's face softened, but pain still lingered in her gaze. "I cannot find peace. The injustice done to me binds me to this place." Nkechi's friend Amara spoke up. "How can we help you find peace? Tell us and we will do anything." Miss Linda's ghostly form flickered for a moment before she replied. "The truth must be revealed. Those responsible must be held accountable. Only then can my spirit rest." With that, the ghost vanished, leaving the corridor enveloped in silence once more. The next morning, Nkechi and her friends approached the principal, Mrs. Adeola, to relay their encounter and Miss Linda's message. Initially skeptical, the principal listened intently as the girls recounted every detail, their sincerity evident. Miss Adeola leaned back in her chair, her face pale and contemplative. Are you certain of what you saw and heard? Yes, ma'am, Nkechi affirmed. Miss Linda's spirit is restless because the truth about her death has been concealed. We owe it to her to uncover what really happened. The principal sighed deeply. There were always doubts surrounding the circumstances of her accident, but we lacked evidence. Perhaps it's time to reopen the investigation. Determined to get to the bottom of the mystery, Mrs. Adeola assembled a committee comprising of staff members and involved the local authorities. They meticulously reviewed the events of that fateful night, re-interviewed witnesses, and examined overlooked evidence. As the investigation progressed, inconsistencies in Mrs. Agnes' account began to surface. Some staff members came forward, admitting they had witnessed tension and bullying directed towards Miss Linda, but had remained silent out of fear. Under mounting pressure, Mrs. Agnes was called in for questioning. Initially, she was defensive. Her facade crumbled as evidence piled against her. Overwhelmed by guilt and the weight of her conscience, she finally broke down and confessed to tampering with the stage light out of jealousy and spite. I never intended for her to die, Mrs. Agnes sobbed. I just wanted to embarrass her, to make her fall from grace. I didn't realize the consequences of my actions until it was too late. Her confession sent shockwaves through Queen's College and the community. Mrs. Agnes was arrested and faced charges of manslaughter and gross negligence. Other teachers involved in the bullying were suspended and subjected to disciplinary action. The school held a memory service for Miss Linda, honoring her memory and acknowledging the injustice she suffered. Students and staff shared heartfelt stories and displayed artworks inspired by her teachings. The atmosphere was one of mourning, but also of healing and reconciliation. That night, as the school lay quiet, Nkechi and her friends felt a sense of closure. They had done what Miss Linda's spirit had asked, and justice had been served.